And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Danny Knell. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson. It's time to get your weekend started right with the big old bag of mail. Before we get into some of your questions, which again, you can submit to the big old bag of mail by going and leaving us a 5-star review. Within that review, put your question. We will add it to a future mailbag episode. Real quickly, a few items of business and a little bit of news. We've gotten a lot of Super League questions. We are not ignoring them. I feel like it's a conversation that we can continue and maybe revisit. And then, of course, the story has changed. Perhaps even a sign of how difficult it would be for this fantasy Super League to happen in college football with the fact that it collapsed so rapidly. I know some of those questions came in Monday and Tuesday. The news, of course, being that the Super League is suspended with 9, pretty much all but 3 of those 12 clubs backing out and stepping back away from it. So thank you for those. We'll continue to consider for more off-season, big picture stuff. We might get into that. I know that we even talked about the potential of like super conferences and what teams would and wouldn't make the cut. All those things could go into the Super League questions that we can address later. And then another order of business, Bud, correction. You wanted to get right at the top of the show?
Yeah. So I said Pepper Rogers, unfortunately. And that's not the defensive coordinator at IMG. It's actually Pepper Johnson. I don't know why I said Pepper Rogers. Pepper Rogers died last year and is about 40 years older than Pepper Johnson is. So
well, I should have corrected you too. I forgot. I just kind of went through it. There's a pepper. How many peppers are there? So that's on me too.
No,
for not catching it.
Listen, I'm always gonna have some grace and understanding, especially for anybody who has to deal with the anybody who goes deep into recruiting. Your mental database is too deep with first and last names, right? Like, because I catch a little bit of it when they've got me in that college football, college basketball crossover, and I start using like a first name of a football player and the last name of a basketball player, and it sort of gets mixed up a little bit. And you're doing that with an even larger database of players every single year, recycling it over. So I hope that the listeners are always going to give you a little bit of grace for some mix-ups like that.
Very, very much appreciated. Yeah, we had a couple of eagle-eared listeners point that out, and I was like, yeah, I did that. Oops.
Do you know how many times I've had to really focus on the Chip Kelly, Brian Kelly, Butch Jones, Butch Davis mix like those? It takes a while. I still don't know the Atlantic and the Coastal. Like, good luck, forget about it. I'm still trying to figure those out. Like, it's hard to keep track of all these names and conferences and realignment in college football.
On this show, though, like, you got some good backup for that, Danny, because I know him. Chip knows him. I'm pretty sure Tom knows him.
Yeah. Do you remember the sideline reporter? I don't know who it was for sure, but she slipped up on the Butch, the first name, didn't say Butch, but she actually said bitch.
Oh, no.
Yes. It was pretty funny. And I want to say it was Butch Jones, and she said Bitch Jones, and people ran with it.
Oh, man.
I called him Botch Jones one point, and on purpose, and we just ran with it. Yeah, that was.
Quick question. I'm just going to fire this one across the board. What's the interest in first round of FCS playoffs this weekend? You going to flip it on? You going to fire off a lock? How's because I was looking at it and I was like, is Bobby Petrino just being there? Is that going to bring me to the table? Missouri State's an 8-point dog in its game against North Dakota, not North Dakota State. There are Davidson, my father's alma mater, is in there as a big time dog, and I'm seeing double-digit dog low total. I mean, if you want to just fire off some underdog plays, just trying to play some principles, then you could do it there. But I am not quite there, but I know Emory Hunt would be able to get us fired up about it. What's y'all's level of interest in this first round of FCS playoffs?
I feel like I had a take that I was wrong on, and I'm never afraid to admit it if I missed on a take. So when they were thinking about moving football to the spring, right, for the Pac-12, Big Ten, other conferences, that was with COVID, they were going to delay it. I was like, that's an awful idea, horrible idea. Don't do it. Go in the fall. Logistics, everything. But at the same time, When the FCS said they were going to wait until the spring, I was like, this is a fantastic idea. Maybe they should do this forever, because the FCS gets buried. They get buried underneath, the college football, the FBS play. No one pays attention to them until the playoffs. If they go to spring, maybe it's new exposure. I think I was wrong on that take. I just don't know. You could put the FCS wherever you want it. I just don't know if there's the brand awareness or the ability to click in to say, yeah, I know North Dakota State's a dynasty, but are you looking for them on a Saturday afternoon in April? I just don't know if that's the case. So I think I was wrong on that take, and it kind of has played over into your question, like how much, if it's on, I'll flip it on. Maybe it's not that much different than a spring game, but like Texas A&M spring games going on.
North Carolina spring game.
There's a bunch. Like, I'll probably gravitate toward those, especially for the first round of the games. Now, maybe it gets the Final Four, a little bit more on the line, a little bit more dialed in. I would watch the playoff games, but I just feel like they're still kind of on the back burner, which I hate saying. I'm just being honest.
Right.
Kind of the same as Danny. My wife is pretty hip to the college football schedule, and she knows like weekends in the fall I'm working, and pretty good number of weekends in the spring I'm on the road doing recruiting stuff. Over the years, she's kind of realized like, this isn't actual work, right? Like sitting here watching FCS games in the spring. So I don't even really try. I think we got like a kid's birthday party and some other stuff to go to this weekend. So if I do watch it, I will probably just try to live bet it and arbitrage some stuff. But like I don't need to know any of the players' names to do that. I'll look at some of the sharper books and live bet some of the slow moving books.
Basically you're just you're tracking that even almost like stocks. Like you might not even be watching the game. You might score track that thing.
Same thing like when we were betting ping pong during the pandemic. So
hey, that I would never wish another summer 2020, but I mean if FCS wants to crush it, just if they were playing in July 2020 like the Bundesliga, boy, I was in on Werder Bremen, like I was getting my deets down on Bundesliga as the first league back. Okay. A little bit of news, very timely news. I was not expecting this. I had no heads up, but in the same week that we released the Oklahoma drill draft, we find out that it is being reported that some of the contact rules for fall camp at the NCAA level are being changed in a way that would include the elimination of the Oklahoma drill. Now, I would say that in the large picture of shifting in rules across football in general, you're probably taking your lead as college football from the NFL, where we've seen some of that contact continue to get lessened and lessened. Like Danny, I'll throw this to you first. Like, what from the competition standpoint do you think are going to be either the impacts to this? How are we feeling about it? Because on one hand, you could say we were always headed this way with sort of the trends. Again, like the way that contact has been lessened at the NFL level. But do you see this as a good thing? I'm having trouble trying to digest it. I feel like I'm trying to just accept it because we were headed this way anyway. Yeah,
we really don't have a choice. I don't know. I'm torn because there's an old school part of me that says, man, these players are getting soft. The game is changing. We've eliminated a lot of the hits, which I do think is a good thing. I think we are this is the evolution of the game. It's becoming more basketball on grass. I think you're seeing longer, faster players as opposed to and I think you'll see them thin out along the offensive and defensive line too, and just get more athletic. Same time, like I do think you have to prepare your body for the game of football. And while I think the intentions are good, I wonder what this leads to in other areas. Does this lead to more potential, either muscle pulls or ACL tears or other injuries because the players aren't ready for the full speed of regular season football? And so I think there will be some drawbacks. And I've said this all along. If you asked any player at any level what he would choose, like if you said, hey, you can have a concussion or you could have an ACL, I think almost all the players would say, I'll take the concussion. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe in 2021, when there's more awareness of concussions, Maybe a player says, no, I'll sit out for a year. Like I'll take my knee. I'll have my brain all the time. Maybe that's the change, but I haven't noticed it. The players that I talk to that really want to play football and get better are frustrated by the concussion rules and want to get better, want to prepare their bodies for the game. Some of the stuff doesn't matter. I don't know how many teams even do Oklahoma drill or bull in the ring or some of these drills. Where this rule probably needs to be implemented is high school and Pee Wee football, where you have some idiot coaches who think they know about the game. And I'm going to get my players tougher. That's where you see some of the idiocy play out in it. Some of the things I think are good. I mean, I would go back to Urban Meyer trying to preach toughness. I mean, it is a tough physical game. That's what's frustrating for me. At some point, I think we just have to acknowledge, hey, there's risks inherent with the sport. We have to be okay with those and move on, because it'll never be safe. And I feel like we're trying to make it safe. And if you want it to be safe, it's going to turn into something dramatically different. We look different, but it still looks kind of the same. Like if you want it to be safe, it's going to have to look totally different. And I don't want that.
Yeah, I'm very like pro player. I think I have some, kind of progressive views about the game, but ultimately just cards on the table. This is an assumption of the risk sport, just like boxing, right? If you want to play, know the dangers, know the potential payday. All right. Are we all cool with that? Fine. Like I totally get, the guys suing the NFL because they didn't understand the risks of concussions, 20 and 30 years ago. Now, I don't know if we fully understand them, but I think we certainly understand them, more than we used to. Danny just nailed this. You shouldn't be just bashing each other's heads to install toughness, with in youth football, and probably not in high school either. Like that's really where a lot more teaching needs to occur, at those levels, so we can have players be smarter, understand the game more. And you do have a lot of coaches who try to substitute toughness and that kind of stuff to make up for a lack of knowledge about the game. I mean, you see that a lot, like even at the high school level. But yeah, I worry about the game getting too soft. I know I'll probably get roasted for that take, but I think toughness and hitting and the violence of it is a part of the draw to the sport. I don't want to lose that completely.
There's a piece of me too. Go ahead. No, I don't think you will either. I actually think most listeners might agree. Like I know, and now this is probably an age delineation too, but if you're over 40, you're probably thinking these players are soft. If you're under 40, you're probably thinking, hey, we need to protect the players. I mean, the younger crowd definitely pay the players. The older crowd, hey, we give them scholarships. There definitely is sort of an age delineation there too. I know no one likes to practice, right? No one. And football is a tough sport to practice. You know, a great way to get out of practice? Man, I got dinged in the head, because every coach has to take you out of practice then. So when I see the numbers and concussions when they started studying this in 2015, and they're up and they say 70% of them occur in practice and 50% of them occur in preseason practice, the concussions that take place during the season, like, well, duh. I mean, I saw players fake injuries all the time because they were tired and worn out, wanted to get. Now those were hamstrings, groins, groin pulls, little nicks, because they just didn't want to practice. I know there's a lot of players that maybe they're scared. Maybe they don't want to get hit. Oh, I got dinged. You are out of practice. You use certain buzzwords, and the trainer's responsibility, he has to take you out of practice. So there's a sinister side of this too. And there isn't everything. Like there's always players, and I was a player looking to take advantage of some of those too. I might've been one saying the same thing if I had gotten nicked and I wanted a day off. So some of these numbers within themselves, I think, are a little bit skewed as well. The other concern of mine too is it just feels like we're going to go to a place where it used to be unlimited. Then it was a certain number. I don't know what it was before, 21 padded practices, but now it goes to 8. Is it that long before we're at 0? Like and the Ivy League already does it. I don't think they tackle it all in practice, because they're the forward thinking, smart cerebral group. They want to do that. But I think you'll see it play out in the field. I think you've already seen poorer tackling than you've seen in the history of college football because they're not practicing it very much.
Those who are making the rules don't have a lot of leverage because they're losing all these other fights, right? Like if you were like full blown, like negotiating with a players union, then there could be ways to cut deals that potentially could lead to more players practicing, more hitting or something that could be negotiated out. But there's just, I think that you're already giving up so much ground just to be able to maintain the current student athlete university, college amateurism relationship, that it's definitely going to continue to go that way. But it'll be interesting to see. The only way we're going to know is just to see what happens when the rules go into place, when we have data points from the first 3 weeks, and we have things like injuries, and when we've got coaches and players, either on the record or off the record, telling us whether they feel the same amount of preparedness or less preparedness. It'll be very interesting to track moving forward. Again, we did not intend to have our Oklahoma drill draft when that news break.
Right.
But it's just ready to win.
We're just exploiting these college players. But I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but you've seen a little bit of a contentious back and forth between the NFL Players Association and the NFL, because the NFL teams are saying, hey, we're ready to get back to work. It's about time when the offseason workouts happen. And several organizations, players are saying, we're not going back because the COVID protocols aren't in place. I roll my eyes so much at that because it's about players not wanting to practice. And I get it. I didn't want to have to live in New York year round. I didn't want to have to live in Denver year round. And they got a little bit of a taste of what it's like to be able to have an off season where you can be at home with your family. You can train on your own. You can do Zoom meetings. And they're making the case. And maybe this is, and maybe there wasn't that much of a difference in the NFL. I think the offensive numbers are up higher than they've ever been, but they're saying we did a whole offseason Zoom remote. No one noticed, during the season. We played 16 games. We had a Super Bowl champion. No one complained about the product in the field. So the players are taking advantage of this a little bit. But the point being, maybe we sit here and talk about this in 2 years, college football still looks exactly the same, and it probably will. I do think it'll affect some of the tackling, but they'll figure it out, and I do think it changed. But I think the game is already changing. It's already evolving to a place where it's not as physical as it was 10 years ago.
That is Danny Cannell, who did his global honeymoon during OTAs, right?
That's right. No, I was back in time for the start of OTAs. Officially, I was back in time for the start.
Okay.
You can go check.
Hey,
check
Cover 3 listeners. Chip here, and I wanted to let you know what's on CBS Sports HQ this week. As always, CBS Sports HQ is your home to start sports news day with live updates kicking off each morning at 8 a.m. Eastern time. And HQ is always your home ahead of the evening's action with live picks from the best analysts and cappers in the sports world each day at 6 p.m. Get your news from what happened the night before at 8 a.m., all there live, great analysis coming from Ryan Wilson, Kyle Porter, all over the place. And then at 6 p.m., get your picks for that night. And as we get closer to the NFL draft, you know what? Just leave HQ on all day for the latest NFL news, rumors, and mock drafts ahead of round 1 on April 29th. Think of HQ as your ultimate NFL draft war room. Like I mentioned, I've seen Danny on there. He's got like full like team needs and different specific rounds, players you can target there. I mean, we talk about the library of first names, last names, and profiles. Danny's locked and loaded. The notepad is got him delivering the goods on CBS Sports HQ. So leave CBS Sports HQ on all day. You can check it out on your computer on CBSSports.com or via the CBS Sports app on your mobile phone or TV. It's always free. It's always on CBS Sports HQ. Get it through the CBS Sports app on your mobile phone or TV or on your computer at CBSSports.com. We're going to start the big old bag of mail with a pretty condensed, basic question. But I do think that we could at least use it to outline some, I don't know, maybe some questions that listeners have always wondered, but maybe not always wanted to ask. Or maybe you just have some assumptions and we can clear them up. So this question comes from Jake. He says, "Hey guys, love the pod. Best CFP coverage available is right here. Can you explain the recruiting process in more detail at some of the top schools? What is it like at Clemson, Alabama, Penn State, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan, Oklahoma, etc.? Jake." So, like, Bud, I'm gonna let you take the lead on this, but I read that question and I assumed that it was, the sub questions that would include like Like, when are they getting in on a guy? How are they finding somebody? Like, what is the process to be able to establish a relationship with them? And how do you continue that all the way through National Signing Day and eventually getting them on campus? We could probably spend a whole episode doing an FAQ, but at least I'm sure a lot of our listeners, might have some assumptions that might not line up with the modern recruiting reality.
Yeah. So I'm glad you threw some of those other questions out there, because when I saw this question in the group chat, I was like, this is probably like a 90-minute answer. So
Right. Yeah. No, it's like, let's take it through the basic stages, the ways that, you organize, find talent, contact them, establish a relationship, get it all the way to signing day.
Sure. So the three primary ways that you're going to find you're going to find talent are as follows, right? So first, there are like scouting and data services. Okay. One that I was literally just at their camp last weekend, so I'll use them as an example. No favoritism here, but UC Report. UC Report is run by the guys who also run like the ESPN 300 and a couple other scouting ventures. They sell cut up clips from their camps and also all of the data, photos showing like how tall the kid is, what his reach is up against verified backboards. The 40 times are lasers. Colleges feel pretty good about the data, from those events. They're able to see clips against other players, and from those clips they can look at the other guy's number and they can see, all right, this guy ran this, he's this tall, he's this year, blah blah blah. So that subscribing to scouting services is definitely a way that schools find out about kids. They also literally will go through their lists of like your all county, all conference, those type of lists, and then watch the huddle highlights. And if they like the highlights, and they usually go watch the full game of the player to see if what kind of habits he has. So they all have like full huddle or full Exos, which is the two main video providers for for college recruiting. So they're all going to do that. These big schools, since the question was limited just to the big schools, they all have armies of scouting guys. I mean, I had 3 guys follow me yesterday who are like student or graduate intern basically types who are just in the recruiting office, and their job is to look to kids. If the highlight tape pops, they're going to send it up to like maybe the position coach, and then who sends it to the coordinator. Usually the head coach will stamp the offer. So that's sort of on like that's how they're finding guys and offering guys who they've never seen in person. Then you have college camps, which is where kids actually come to your camp. A lot of these big schools require you to come to their camp just because they don't want to miss. They they have the resources to staff the camp pretty effectively, and they're able to work you out in person. See how you react to certain coaching, put you through drills that they believe fit their system. They're going to take even more measurements sometimes than some of these other camps will. I know schools, like they're compiling data on middle schoolers for hand size, wrist size, neck size, shoe size, all that kind of stuff, so they can track you through your year, especially if you're a kid who comes to, let's say George's camp or something. If you go to Kirby Smart camp from 5th grade, you're probably in a system. You don't even realize it, right? Like every single year that you show back up. Yeah, for sure. They want all that data on you to track your progress. So they'll give out offers, and identify kids via their camps. The third way is when they go and visit on the road, right, during the spring evaluation period, which COVID has largely robbed us of. And there's also evaluation period in the fall where you're going to get go on the road and watch kids, in games on Fridays. But the main evaluation is done when they're going to your practice in the spring. You'll see, like I'll go to a lot of spring practices normally at the high school level. And you'll see, hey, here's the guy in slacks and a polo. This is, it's Brandon Streeter from Clemson, right? Their quarterback coach, and they're watching some guys, and they'll talk with the coaches. They'll usually stop in and talk to the guidance counselors, ask to see some transcripts, things like that for guys who they liked. And while they're down there, they'll also usually have dinner with some local community leaders, 7-on-7 coaches, street agents, whatever you want to call it. Like, I don't want to imply anything nefarious here, but like there's a lot of times that the guys pulling the strings on these recruitments are not necessarily the high school coach, kind of like the AAU basketball scene is. And so they're able to find out about kids there. And those guys know a whole lot, right? Like, it's very important in modern recruiting that you have people in your program who are tight with the high schools, but also tight with the trainers, off-season coaches, 7-on coaches, the guys who are spending a lot of time with these dudes, the guys who are driving them, to and from high school campuses, if that's not, or to college campuses, if that's not the high school coach. So those are generally the three ways that they identify kids, right? One is digital, the other two are in person. One of the in person being on campus and the other being, being off campus. Then generally, like, you'll watch, and interrupt me if it doesn't make sense or if I'm skipping over something, but generally they'll watch film in recruiting meetings, right? As a staff on the whole, or as a staff separated. So you may have offensive meeting, defensive meeting. Different schools do it different ways. And just for instance, I know what Clemson does. They have basically, like, they have a recruiting board, and then they have different levels on their board. I think they call it like above the fold, below the fold. And that dictates, how much communication that they're going to send to that player. They're going to have little tags on there, like he has an offer or he doesn't have an offer. Is he committed? Where is he committed? They're going to have information. And then they literally have a board, sometimes it's nameplates. Sometimes it's, just written up with all the information. There's a digital copy as well. I mean, it's literally somebody's job to make sure that the big board matches the digital copy everybody can access. So if you're a coach and you're visiting somebody at a high school, you can pull it up on your phone. Okay, here's our board. This is where we think this kid is. He has an offer, or he's like potential close, or they might tag it like, offer if you verify in person, right? Which, like, hey, we like the film, go see him in person. You can offer him there. And that's important information for the staff to have, because, like, what if a kid tries to commit to you? If it's not a committable offer, then you need to be able to slow play the kid. Like, hey man, I really love you. Obviously we like your stuff. We just need you to come work out for us in person at the camp, which is the way they generally stall kids who they like, but they're not quite ready to accept a commitment from, early on, especially.
And I imagine that happens a lot, because we're talking about top programs where there's more players who would like to play for this program than there's necessarily spots with the scholarship offers.
And specifically spots right now, because you may be their plan C. Once plan A and plan B go elsewhere, all of a sudden you're their plan A. So they need to keep that relationship alive, right? It's like having a backup girl you're pretty sure you can ask for prom, but you're gonna shoot your shot first, right? With the girl who's probably gonna turn you down, but, like, there's no sense in not asking. So yeah, that's kind of how they go about managing that. There are software programs out there that track coaches' phones to see who they've called, how long the call was, making sure they do their calls, how many text messages they've sent, how many tweets they've sent, like DMs, Instagram DMs, whatever. Most of them aren't using TikTok, but, and they can't track you on the video game stuff. So some coaches do use video games, like to talk to kids, but the software, just from knowing some guys are working back office stuff, they can't
get on Fortnite and let's use our little headset, which is able to just, like, continue the relationship.
Right, exactly. But, like, so programs are tracking who they're calling, who they're messaging, just to make sure, like, coaches aren't forgetting to do it, and I know some programs make their guys stay in the office and make calls, but less and less now because of technology. Like, they're allowing them to do the phone calls from home, as long as they're able to track it and make sure that the work, actually gets done, which kind of reflects how America's going too. Like, you're not necessarily have to be in the office just to get your work done, as long as we can track your stats. So that's kind of how they keep track of which coaches are doing the messaging for them. You got to coordinate with, like, when do we want to make? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, it's like with the top programs, at what point do you get passed up to the head coach? Like, when it's like is that a late in the game? Is that different from program to program? Are there some head coaches that are very involved from the beginning? Are there some coaches that, because they understand the way that demand works at their particular school, that, like, when they come to campus, they get a little bit of time, but for the most part, the relationship is managed by the position coach?
So a lot of it depends on the kid, right? But are you asking more as far as, like, face-to-face time, or are you asking more like, is the head coach having to stamp the offer as, this is a kid we want to offer?
I imagine most head coaches are stamping the offer. I think it's more like face-to-face or even phone call time. I think it's like resource of time invested by the head coach. Is it something that happens later in the process because it's like, okay, now it's finally time to lock this thing up? Early signing periods coming up in 8 weeks. I don't know what the dead periods are, but it's been managed mostly by the position coach for a year and a half, and now it's time to pass you up to be able to seal the deal? Like, is there any coordination to that, or is it totally different across the board?
There's definitely some coordination to it. I'm glad you mentioned this because I want to backtrack on this for a second. So the relationships are primarily managed by the position coach and the area recruiter, right? Almost every school out there, even the ones that have basically unlimited resources, are going to break their region up by areas, because it doesn't make sense to fly the position coach to 60 different cities to see 60 potential quarterbacks, right? Like, you're going to have your area recruiter. He's going to report back. That's why you have those staff meetings. Hey, coach, I may be the DB coach, right? But I have Orlando as my area. And I saw 3 quarterbacks here. This kid looks like he could play for us. This kid, I'm not so sure. Maybe I want your opinion on. This kid's definitely a no. He's actually like 5'8". He's not the 6'1" that he listed on his, on his huddle profile. So those two guys manage the relationships. I will say a trend that I've noticed increasingly, we mentioned this with Tyler Booker, right? In last week's show, the offensive tackle from IMG. I am increasingly seeing more and more guys say that my best relationship is actually with somebody who's not a coach. So at GA, some sort of analyst or assistant. LSU had some baller analysts like 2 years ago that was helping them with their class. Eddie Gordon, the guy at Georgia, who Tyler Booker said his best relationship was, because we're, quote, basically the same age. Eddie Gordon's like 23 years old. He played for Louisiana Lafayette, and now he's like a offensive line GA at Georgia. So those relationships are important too. I think a lot of it is you need to judge based on the kid and the family, right? Sometimes you got parents that are not going to fall for like the traditional recruiting tactics, and you need the head coach to come in there and sort of shoot straight more, or assure them that like what they're getting. Other times the kids really want to talk to the head coach more, and some kids are just totally cool being handled by the position coach, especially if they have a long-standing relationship with them. You don't typically see head coaches dealing with underclassmen as much unless they are just no doubt studs, right? Like, I think we have 3 5-stars right now in the 2023 class, maybe, like guys we're real sure we're not going to have to drop out of the top 100, even if they're, backslide some. So I would say head coaches spend a lot more of their time, for the most part, talking to the current class, whereas position coaches and area recruiters are spending more time talking to younger kids.
Danny, how does that line up to sort of your experience, or even still being like, tangentially aware and talking to coaches and stuff? Is that, sounds like it's for the most part still, I mean, the methods of communication are more widespread and modern, but it sounds like organizationally, I mean, the ones that were able to get it done, like that seems like it's been able to be carried across time, right?
Oh, for sure. And I think there is kind of a hierarchy in the process of, the foot soldiers who are doing more of the grunt work, the guys that are the analysts or the GAs or the lower, and they're probably a little bit more out in the road early with the underclassmen, like you're saying, maybe develop a handshake. Hey, they're just a very casual relationship, start to get it going. And then when the player builds a higher profile, then all of a sudden, maybe it's the position coach or the regional coach, like Bud's talking about. And then kind of the ultimate, when everybody kind of like the GA goes back and says the position, hey, you got to see this guy, man. And we'll check out this guy's film. And then the position coach sees it, likes it, then he bumps it up the ladder, and then everybody's on the same page. And then you kind of go with this full court press. For me, it was kind of interesting because the process, now this is 20 years ago, so this is definitely changing, but similar type of, and I played at a really small high school. We'd never had anybody go Division I before. I didn't start playing football till my junior year. So the spring of my sophomore year, which was my first time putting on pads, didn't even know how to put them on. We're at spring practice and it's just us. Like, there's no coaches there. Then my junior year, we win the state championship. And then my junior year spring practice, all of a sudden I'm seeing these guys and I have no idea. I was not a huge college football fan. So like George Perlis is at our practice, who was the head coach at Michigan State. And I didn't even know who he was. But I saw this green, blazer, like windbreaker on. And I see some of these other guys who are younger assistant coaches, and it's just the colors. They wear their school colors and you see them. And I'm like, what? Like, all right, what are these coaches doing? I figured they were just kind of making the rounds. And I never forget, my coach called me in and he said, look, this is not normal. We do not see this every time. These are coaches here to watch you. And I was like, oh, really? And then I remember Ronnie Cottrell, the head recruiting coordinator at Florida State, said, we have you listed as our number 1 quarterback in the country. And I was like, what? I had no idea like what recruiting was all about. And then at the time, and I'd be curious, I don't even know if Bud, I still see players reference this, but when he said the thing about Clemson tagging, like who's getting the materials, the mailbox was full every day. And some schools, like for whatever reason, South Carolina sent me more paper materials. Like almost every single day, I got some sort of brochure, handwritten note from a coach, some sort of information from South Carolina. But every day it was like some other school where when it was all done, I had well over 100 schools that had sent me letters. But then well, how many schools called? Probably cut that down to about 30 or 40, kind of to gauge the interest. Then how many head coaches actually came to a game or practice? Probably about 20, 25. So it kind of whittles it down. And I think the school's interest and my interest reciprocated to them kind of spurns on those relationships. Like Notre Dame sent me a letter. I had a coach call and I'm like, really? I watch your guys' offense. Probably not the best fit. And it was kind of like, okay. So we realized like, we're probably not a match made in heaven, but they kind of wanted to feel that, hey, it's multi-sport athlete. Maybe he'd be in. I didn't run any kind of running offense in high school, but you kind of figure it out. So there's relationships that kind of fall by the wayside naturally. But I was very, very fortunate because I was highly recruited. I did get to choose who I feel bad for. Not bad for, because it's a great situation to be in, but I just had a nephew who was recruited as a 3, maybe 4-star basketball player. So like Bud was saying about, and maybe this did happen. Maybe if I would have gone to, I'm trying to think, I don't think it would have, because I think I could have gone anywhere I wanted to and said, if I'm ready to commit to you. But I could imagine the disappointment because let's just say coaches change their mind. Let's say my senior year, I had a bad year of being told, we really want you. We really want you. We offering you a scholarship. So to a young 17, 18-year-old, you're thinking that is a scholarship. And I see everybody sees Instagram and Twitter. Hey, I got another offer today. I got another offer. And while a lot of them, they may be true, the majority of them are just verbal offers that hold no weight. And then all of a sudden you're that 4-star quarterback who maybe goes to school X and says, I am ready to commit. Well, guess what happened? That 5-star just committed last week. And all of a sudden that offer, which you thought you had, is no longer there. And that makes some really weird, uncomfortable circumstances that are just really unfortunate. And I hate that because I see players get wrapped up in it all the time. And it's the really like dirty, nefarious part of the business that I don't think people can understand unless you've gone through it, and that's like, there leads to a lot of disappointment and hurt feelings. And you realize just how cutthroat a business it is, which is probably one of the reasons players are so quick to transfer. They've been mistreated through the recruiting process. They're like, screw this. I'm going to take care of mine, and it's an unfortunate underbelly of the recruiting world.
Danny, did they wear shoes that were way too nice for the rest of the outfit they were wearing?
The shoe craze is definitely more newer craze because they were wearing original Jordans if they were wearing Jordans, not the collectible Jordans that are out now, like the re-release version that you can only find on StockX for $500+.
Yeah, it always strikes me. You're seeing this guy wear, just regular khakis, Nike Polo is probably like $60 and like $500 shoes. I'm like, yes. It's raining today at Lehigh, man. Like this is like, but like every time.
Yeah. By the way, my nephew just signed with Clemson. Shout out ACC.
There you go.
To play hoops?
National letter of intent. Yeah. So it's official, not a verbal, because he got a bunch of offers, but this one is locked in stone. He's headed to Clemson. Yeah.
I mean, listen, you're going to be a part of a hard defense, You're going to be
fits his mold perfectly.
Yeah,
about 6'9", 6'10", hardworking kid.
Yeah, Brad Brownell getting a good one right there. Coming up on the other side, we look at this NFL draft class at the quarterback position and see if there's any comparisons to one of the most notable NFL draft quarterback classes of all time. That and more next. All right, so we're going to do a ton of NFL draft content for you coming up in the next week. We've previewed it. We're going to be doing a show going into the NFL draft, sort of talking about some of our storylines, players to watch, things that stand out to us, the people who actually watch these guys. not just the YouTube or Twitter clips. And we're going to have a Thursday night instant reaction show to the first round, and then cycle back at the end of the weekend. Some of the best steals, the players who landed in day 3, especially, that we think are going to have a great chance to succeed. Same with undrafted free agents. Okay. This one, next question comes from Barnaby. With 5 quarterbacks and possibly 6, if someone takes a chance on Kyle Trask, projected to go in round 1 next week, how would you compare this year's quarterback class to the heralded first-round quarterback class of 1983, top to bottom? Also, would all 6 round 1 quarterbacks of the 83 class be first-round picks if they played in, quote, today's college football? And on the flip side, given the NFL's affinity for drafting quarterbacks in round 1, would an NFL team today reach for a Gary Kubiak or Reggie Collier in the first round?
I love it. First 2 comments. Chip, you must have taken over Barton's internet services because I know yes. First of all, you're on a delay. So even when I asked that question, it took 3 seconds for you to respond. But then you know how you do, it's gonna be windy in Laramie. You've had a couple comments where you're like, on the other side of the break. We've gotten that. And then the other thing was, did you say et cetera?
Yeah.
As opposed to et cetera?
Yeah, it's the proper Latin it's a proper Latin pronunciation.
Here comes the Chapel Hill. That come on. Are you sure that's the official Latin? I took 3 years of Latin in high school. Is that for sure?
Hey, I took 4 and did all right on the AP Latin test.
It's like tell us you did not go to Florida public school without telling us you went to Florida. You did not go to Florida public school.
So what do we think? 1983 to 1983 to this one.
All right, now I know we've reached peak overhype of the draft class because it's starting to bother me a little bit, and it's not a knock against any one of these guys that are coming out, but we are just in a different era with how we value quarterbacks. Clearly, we are in an era where we were over drafting quarterbacks. I really only think Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback that would be number 1 overall of any, like the last 20, 30 years. I think the other guys would probably be top 15. And some of them, like a guy like Trey Lance, who hasn't laid down that much tape, I think he'd probably be a second rounder 10 or 15 years ago. So maybe that's kind of getting you, like, I'm looking at some of these quarterbacks and the teams that are thinking about drafting in. I'm like, are you sure that's an upgrade? Like, are you really going to go this direction? Like, are you go? Because I think it's a massive risk on their hands. Clearly they think it is. Now it's going to get talked about because if we see them go 1, 2, 3, 4, which I don't think is likely, but even if we see go 1, 2, 3, which is likely, I think you have to wait for history to decide. On potential alone, yeah, some of them athletic and some of them put down amazing college stats. Yes, but I still don't think they would compare to the class of 83. I mean, that to me goes up there as the all-time, I'm stating the obvious here. And I have serious, and I'm sure people had concerns. I mean, there were concerns about the class of 83 too, but I'm very skeptical of this class, which it's just the nature of the position. I mean, you guys have heard some of these stats. I'll give you this one that I saw the other day. And I think you guys, we might have listed them on here from 2009 to 2016. So a 7-year period, 22 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. None of them are on the team that drafted him. Half of them aren't playing anymore. That's a 7-year window, 2009 to 2016, 22 quarterbacks, half are not even playing anymore. And then the more recent 2007 to 2019, 3 first-round quarterbacks already gone from the teams that took them. Like, it's just a crapshoot now, but teams are willing to throw caution to the wind and saying, we got to take them because we don't want to miss out on the guy that could be the next whoever, which I'm trying to figure out, who is the guy you're trying to be? Like, maybe you should spend more time looking for the next Dak Prescott or the next Tom Brady, because those guys, 4th and 6th round picks, like, there are more success stories almost from guys that were selected later.
I get what Danny's saying. I would a little bit disagree in this regard. Previously, I think it made sense to try to find value at the quarterback position later on in the draft. But, the latest CBA has made it far less punitive if you take a QB in the early rounds of the draft and whiff, right? Like it used to be if you took who's like Jamarcus Russell is probably the most famous one, right? I mean, that contract, it cooked the Raiders for a while. Nowadays, you're actually incentivized to take a quarterback in the first round because if you hit, you actually get the extra year of club cost control for 5 years instead of 4. And the bonus structure is just so depressed because unions eat their young, right? And they voted basically to cut the rookie wage scale by a ton to give more money to veterans, which obviously, if you're a veteran, you're going to do that. So like, there's not a huge penalty for missing. I mean, right. Like all those misses, those clubs, the only thing they're suffering from is the fact that they miss. They're not in salary cap hell for 3 or 4 years after the miss. So for my opinion, I'm not sold on all these guys, but still keep firing. If you don't have a quarterback, you can't win in this league. That's truer than it's ever been, given the passing numbers keep going up. So just keep firing. And, if I'm the Dolphins, I would think about taking another quarterback. I know that's crazy, but like, unless you're like 1,000,000% sold on Tua, take another guy. Like all the rest of your roster doesn't matter that much unless you actually have a QB, man. So like make sure you have one. I say keep firing on it. But like 4 or 5 years ago, pre-new CBA, totally agree, because that would hurt your franchise for a long time if you missed.
Right. I mean, I definitely I sound frustrated, and I am, but you're 100% right. I mean, I just said it the other day about Tennessee. Yeah, bring in all. I would have the same philosophy in the NFL. Like, bring them in, bring as many as you can until you find that guy. The thing that gets interesting, though, Jimmy Garoppolo, pretty good. Like, he's not great, but he's pretty good. Are you sure you're getting an upgrade? Maybe. But that to me is a massive risk. Matt Ryan, I feel, still has like some good years left in him. You're going to pass on some incredible talented players because maybe that's why I don't think they take a quarterback at 4. Like, you're going to pass on some incredibly talented players. When you have a Super Bowl, I think you can win a Super Bowl with. Like, I think that's insanity, but I don't think that happens either. I'll be surprised if that happens.
1983 of those 6 quarterbacks, 3 became Hall of Famers. John Elway, Jim Kelly, and Dan Marino. The other quarterbacks in that class were, let's see.
Who'd you name? It was
John Elway, Jim Kelly, and Dan Marino went on to be Hall of Famers. Ken O'Brien was a Pro Bowler, and Tony Eason was also in that class, and Todd Blackledge was a top 10 pick in that class. So I'm going to say that you do not have 3 Hall of Famers in the 2021 NFL draft quarterback class. All right, one more here. This one, we get a lot of playoff proposals. Sometimes everyone's got their own twist to it, but I thought this one was interesting. It comes from Walt. Hey guys, love the pod. I had a question on an idea for playoff expansion that I have not heard talked about much. I am a fan of 8 teams with 6 conference champs and 2 at-large teams. As a Notre Dame fan, at-large are crucial. The twist I would like to see is instead of 5 Power 5 champs plus the highest Group of 5 champ, what if the auto bids were the 6 highest-ranked conference champions regardless of Power 5 or Group of 5? While the results would likely be the same most years, I think this would solve some of the problems brought up about auto bids, such as a 7-5 team upsetting an undefeated team in the title game, or last year when number 25 ranked Oregon would have got in over number 12 Coastal. I don't think this would ever happen, but I'm curious if you prefer this over the 5 Power 5 plus 1 Group of 5 proposal. So it would keep the selection committee's job very important, because if the selection committee has, going into Championship Sunday, if the selection committee has a Group of 5 team playing for a conference championship well above some of the underdogs in those Power 5 conference championship games, it does set up the situation that these automatic bids, these 6 automatic bids going to conference champions, might not all be to power conferences. And it would incentivize, or at least seem to provide a little bit more access, that in a year that the Pac-12 is down, that the Big 12 is down, that the ACC is down, that you could find a way to get in beyond just having to be competing against other Group of 5 conference champions.
You know, it would change dramatically. The rankings. They would figure out a way to make sure those Power 5 conferences were going to be at the highest ranked spots to make sure they got in. 2 or 3 losses. Boy, it was a gauntlet this year. What a tough conference that was this year. The Pac-12 was just brutal. It really, it's just the way it's going to be. I love the way he's thinking. I love the proposal. And that was my first initial reaction when he said 6 conference champions, 2 at large. I was like, ooh, where's he going with the 6? I don't know. When you said we've heard a lot of different ideas, it felt like I'd heard them all, because I've heard so many on social media or people chiming in or radio callers or wherever you run into college football fans. Everyone has a suggestion with how to fix the system. I like it. Like, why not? I don't know if it would solve I don't know if it would solve the problem that we run into, because I do think there would still be an inherent bias to the Power 5 schools and the Power 5 conferences.
I don't know much to add. I think Danny just nailed this. Like, if you think they cooked the books on the rankings already, they would definitely do it here.
Right. Like, I mean, we see it happen all the time. Like Cincinnati, highest ranked, they're up there. You're telling me let's see. Well, it was a weird year. I mean, it's such a weird year. It's hard, but there would have been a Pac-12 team probably ranked higher than Cincinnati. They would have worked it out.
Yeah.
You had the two-loss Big 12 teams higher than the undefeated Cincinnati team going into conference championship Saturday, right? Mm-hmm. That was what we were all circling.
Yep.
Yeah, the Iowa and Oklahoma both ranked ahead of undefeated Cincinnati, and undefeated, Coastal. You're just shrugging your shoulders at that point. Yeah, very, very interesting. And thank you to Walt for that proposal. You can follow him on Twitter at Danny Cannell. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. It's NFL draft week, so get ready. Make sure that you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Gentlemen, thank you very much.